Morning, farmers. Good morning, Zimbabwe. Thank you for joining us today on this edition of our Kutsaga webinar series. I'm Owen Mudadisi from the Agricultural Biosystems, Bioinformatics and Statistics and Engineering Division, specifically in the Engineering Skills Group, where we focus on research as far as tobacco curing is concerned. Our aim is to have sustainable tobacco curing, that sustainable in the sense that we are also curing, but at the same time we are taking care of the environment. So we're curing in an efficient manner that ensures that we are able to take care of the environment that we're using to extract fuel from in order to cure our tobacco. So today I'm going to talk to you about an interesting topic that is curing tobacco sustainably. Of course, this is also emanating from the fact that our tobacco is sold in international markets where sustainability issues are also now very critical. And we've seen so many of our markets now pushing towards sustainability reporting and along the tobacco value chain. So that means us as a supplier of the world market, we also have to take sustainability seriously. And as Kutsaga, we are at the forefront of driving that sustainable tobacco curing. So let's dive into it and understand how we can cure in a sustainable manner that saves fuel and that saves also money so that we can have the profits that we desire sustainably. So tobacco curing is the most important stage along the tobacco value chain because this is the stage that determines the ultimate quality of our tobacco, the flavor profile of our tobacco, the aroma that comes out of our tobacco, and ultimately the price that we then get from the market when we go to sell our tobacco. So definitely every farmer has to be aware of what they are doing and to ensure that they get the best of all those things. Now diving into what tobacco curing really is. To demystify the misconception that most farmers have that tobacco curing is just about drying the tobacco or achieving a nice lemon color. It is a combination of so many factors and so many things that we intend to achieve in this stage. So in essence, tobacco curing entails converting starch to sugars and then removing moisture from the leaf to achieve a completely dry leaf that we can store and take to the market. We also intend to achieve a color that we desire, which is mostly the lemon color that's predominant in the market currently. We also want to achieve a flavor profile that sells in the market and gives a good price. And we also want to have an aroma in the tobacco that sells in the market. So when you go to the market, buyers are looking for all of these factors, not only the color, not only the fact that your tobacco is dry enough, but they're also looking for all of these other things that then determines the ultimate price. Some farmers may be surprised. You have one farmer who is maybe a dark orange style tobacco, but they are getting a better price than another farmer who has maybe a nice lemon color. That's because, as they popularly say in the market, fojga haina chinhu. That means you have lost the flavors, you have lost the aromas in the chase for the color. So after this presentation, you should be able to know what to do so that you can achieve all of these four facts or factors and get your nice quality. If this tobacco curing is done wrongly, obviously losses and deformities result. You get your tobacco that is heavily with blemishes, or it has gone through all of these burn diseases or burn conditions that are like sponge or your burn rot and all of that, you name it. So we want to avoid you having such tobacco, but getting a nice clean quality leaf that has all the flavor and the aroma that's required in the market. So to cure your tobacco effectively and achieve top quality, tobacco curing starts from the field where you're harvesting your tobacco, and you have to ensure that you reap your leaf ripe. Fodya ngaiti mweyaiva, just to make sure that you get the best quality in the tobacco curing barn. You will not get bad quality tobacco from the field and make it good in the barn. Rather, it has to be good from the field and then you make it excellent in the barn. So reap the leaf ripe. So it means the farmer has to understand what it is that they should look for on a tobacco leaf, that tells them that the leaf is ripe. So number one, you see color changes in the leaf. It turns to a nice yellow lemon color. Um, it turns pale rather than dark. It also shows what we call puckering. In shona kuunyana, kunaita shisha kuya kuya. It's also a sign of your leaf is also ripe. Another thing, when you've harvested your ripe leaf from the field and you get to the barns, ensure that you take your leaf as quickly as possible to the barn so that you avoid it losing moisture while it is just being out there in the field, and you're delaying your loading in the barn. And when you load it into the barn, ensure that you load your barn uniformly to ensure that you don't have pockets of air where in other parts of the tobacco barn your air is moving fast, and in other parts your air is stuck. What happens if you don't load your tobacco uniformly is you will not have uniform wield in the inside your barn. So the other part of the barn is at this stage, and the other part of that barn is at another stage, and you don't want that because it affects the ultimate curing cycle length, and also you start losing out on the other parts where there's accelerated curing, and on the other parts where there's slow curing. Avoid baboon reaping, whereby you just take leaves simply because you want to just stock them up in the barn. Some other leaves are not even ripe yet, and you're just taking them up to the barn. Avoid that because you will not get the best leaf quality. And you also have to match your barn capacity to your production capacity. If you have barns that can only take 2 hectares of tobacco, please make sure that you don't grow 2.5. Just grow 2 hectares of tobacco. Overloading your barn sometimes means you're also losing out on the ultimate weights that come out of the barn, and it's not even a good thing that you desire on the market, or as a farmer. You want to make sure that whatever that you put in, you get the maximum possible output out of the barn. Also make sure that you're using a monitoring gadget, that is, as we recommend, a wet bulb and dry bulb thermometer, so that you can be tracking your barn conditions. I'll emphasize how critical that is at a later point in this presentation. So now, getting or diving deeper into the curing process, it's a broadly a two-stage process, whereby the first stage you are coloring your tobacco, or you are converting your starch to sugars, and then the second stage is when you are now then just drying the leaf to ensure that you're able to then store it and send it to the market and preserve its quality that you'd have achieved in the coloring stage. So as you load your tobacco into the barn, you're coloring now. The coloring phase, it happens at a temperature range that ranges from about 30 degrees to a maximum of 40 degrees, but the optimum being around 35 degrees. Of course, this depends on the condition of your tobacco, as I'll explain later in this presentation. So as you load your tobacco, your bottom and top vents are entirely closed. The aim, or what you intend to achieve, is to try to create uniform conditions of temperature and humidity in the barn, and also start your coloring process. So this happens for the first 6 hours, but this is not a one size fits all procedure. Sometimes you take less time, or when your vents are open, or sometimes you take a little longer, depending on the condition of your barn, or of your tobacco that you've loaded into the barn. And as you elevate your temperatures, at this stage you don't just take your temperatures up like that. You make sure that you're raising, because what you're handling here is a live biological product, and you want to make sure that you're creating conditions that are optimum for your enzymes to function. So we don't want huge spikes in temperature rises. You raise your temperature gradually as you are monitoring your dry bulb and your wet bulb temperature, to ensure that you also don't kill the leaf, or you also don't affect the conditions, optimum conditions that allow enzymatic action in the coloring of your leaf, as you are at the first stage of your curing. So at the end of this coloring stage, when your temperatures are now around 38 to 40 degrees, you have to ensure that by that time you are ventilating enough to make sure that you achieve a wilt in your tobacco. Fodya yako inofana kunge isisina kuzara mvura. It must be wilting enough to ensure that you can see through your tobacco. If you look up from the bottom tier, looking up to the top tier, you should be able to see the tobacco that's at the top tier. And at this stage also, the green now in your tobacco is left now only in the veins and on the midrib. That means you've achieved almost your full color, but not full color if you're using our bands that are not that are not using forced air, or which is our normal smallholder farmer bands. And now what you want to do is to get into a stage which we normally call a transitioning phase from your coloring to your laminar drying, which is the color fixing. It's not a distinct stage, but it's a transition from your coloring as you go to your laminar drying. So you're now raising your temperatures as well. So the general rule of thumb is to raise your temperature at 3 degrees for every 4 to 6 hours. Of course, the 4 to 6 hours depends on the condition of your tobacco. Is it thin or is it thick bodied? And where have you grown your tobacco? Have you grown it in the fast growing areas or in the slow growing areas? So this 4 to 6 hours now entirely depends on the condition of your tobacco. So it's not a one size fits all. So a farmer has to be wise enough to understand what they are doing at this stage. So now you have opened your top and bottom vents fully, because what you want to ensure is now that you're losing also moisture to ensure that you are killing the leaf. So it's a combination of raising the temperature and also removing moisture from the tobacco bun to ensure that your leaf is now drying and you are preserving whatever that you've gotten in terms of the color and the flavor profile and the sugars that have been conserved, that have been converted from the starch. You now want to ensure that you're preserving all of these properties. So now you want to ventilate, and at the end of this, you have to have advanced wilting, and coloring should have stopped now because you've killed the enzymes by raising your temperature maybe to a maximum of 49 degrees at this stage. And your tips should be dry now, as you are now commencing your laminar drying. And now moving on to the laminar drying, um, now your temperatures are now being raised from 50 to a maximum of 60 at the end of this stage. You want to ensure that you have done your coloring and wilting successfully to ensure that at this stage now you are not struggling to raise your temperature, because it becomes very difficult for you to raise your temperature beyond 50 degrees if your barn has too much moisture in it. So you have to be very careful during the first stage, which is the coloring stage. So now at this stage you lose 50% more moisture to make it about 80% moisture loss from your leaf. So no more conversions are happening at this stage, and at the end of this stage just your midrib now is left with moisture, but your lamina or your leaf has dried entirely, and you're now moving to the midrib drying. So in the midrib drying now, what you're now starting to do at the end of this laminar drying is you're now starting to close down your vents slightly until you've fully closed these vents, and you're now doing your midrib drying at a maximum of 70 degrees Celsius. You do not want to exceed 70 degrees, as you may now end up losing the quality of your tobacco as well. And at the end of this, your tobacco curing cycle has come to an end, and you would have achieved a good quality cure if you followed this religiously, and of what's happening in your leaf. So in general, if you are monitoring your curing cycle and tracking your temperatures, you should be seeing a gradual raise in your temperatures, and also a maintenance at whatever stage that you'd have reached, as is shown by this graph. And you should never exceed your 70 degrees like I've exceeded during the stage where you're now drying your midrib. And what's important to follow to manage your humidity levels or your moisture levels within the barn, and also just have a good drying rate, is your wet bulb temperature depression. What do I mean by your wet bulb temperature depression? If you're using your wet bulb and the dry bulb thermometer to monitor your conditions at the beginning of your curing cycle, say for example you're at 30 degrees, that means your wet bulb temperature should be at somewhere around 28 degrees, 29 to 28 degrees, because at the coloring stage you should ensure that you have a 2-degree wet bulb depression. That means your wet bulb temperature always has to be 2 degrees lower than your dry bulb temperature. What does this mean? Your wet bulb temperature speaks to the moisture or the saturation that's within your environment. Your tobacco is losing moisture, and the moisture is going into the environment and ultimately out of the barn through the vents. So if your wet bulb temperature and the dry bulb temperature are the same, it means now you have achieved complete saturation and you are not drying your tobacco, you are not wilting your tobacco. So you always have to make sure that your wet bulb temperature is lower than your dry bulb temperature, so that you can always have that gradient, that you're losing moisture from the leaf into the barn and from the barn out through the vents. And that then means that you have your a good drying rate. But as a farmer, you have to know that your tobacco speaks, and as a farmer, you have to listen to that tobacco. I then come to this important stage where we have these important tools that we use in monitoring our tobacco barns. We have our usual wet and dry bulb thermometer. Now we have all of these other digital technologies like the ones we're using here at Kutsaga, which is your tempo disc. It follows through your tobacco curing cycle, and all you have to have is a mobile phone, and you connect to your tempo disc, and then it's just showing you the conditions that are in the barn. So as your barn is speaking, you listen to the wet bulb temperatures and the dry bulb temperatures. And all you have to do is just ensure that you have the dry bulb and wet bulb temperature depression to make sure that you have a consistent loss of moisture from your leaf into the barn and out through the vents. So as a farmer, you cannot be using the look and see method whereby the farmer gets into the barn and then they smell the barn and then they're like, now I need to ventilate. You have to use the tools that have been made available to you so that you have an optimum cure and a good quality cure using the minimum amount of fuel, and also, of course, having less time to then carry out your curing cycle. So during your coloring stage and transitioning into the laminar drying stage, these wet bulb depressions have to be followed religiously to ensure that you have a good ventilation schedule, because this is what they inform. If your wet bulb temperature and your dry bulb temperature are now matched, what it means is that you have to ventilate your barn and hold your temperature at whatever state that it's at, so that you can be able to take out all of this moisture and ensure that you're wilting and ultimately drying your leaf. So please, as farmers, you have to ensure that you have either one of these at your farm to make sure that you are able to follow your wet bulb into dry bulb temperature so that you can yield best from your cure consistently. I also encourage every farmer to come through to Kutsaga so that you can get all the current information, or reach out on the numbers provided on the screen to get current information on tobacco curing and how you can get the best cure consistently, and also using minimal resources in terms of your fuel and your electricity. And from the Kutsaga Agricultural Bioinformatics, Statistics and Engineering Division, I say thank you for following through the presentation, and we look forward to seeing you and having conversations with you, and also responding to all of the questions that you might have as far as tobacco curing is concerned to get the best leaf quality. Thank you and have a good day.